I'm glad my sister's boyfriend cheated on her because now she can't marry the man who ruined my life in college. My sister Katie brought him to Sunday dinner 6 months ago. She was grinning like an idiot, holding his hand, saying she wanted us to meet someone special. The second he walked through the door, my stomach dropped. Taller now, beard covering his face. But I knew those eyes. Trevor Walsh, the guy who got me expelled from State University 4 years ago. Katie introduced him as Aaron. Aaron Mitchell. He shook my dad's hand, hugged my mom, then turned to me. I watched his face. Nothing. No recognition. He had no idea who I was. I'd cut my hair short since college, lost 30 pounds, wore contacts instead of glasses, but I knew exactly who he was. Senior year of college, I caught Trevor and 2 of his roommates cheating on the final exam in Professor Graham's accounting class. They had photos of the answer key on their phones under the desk. I reported it to the professor because I'd studied for 3 weeks straight and these guys were going to curve wreck everyone else. Professor Graham investigated, found the photos, started the disciplinary process. 2 days later, Trevor broke into my dorm room while I was at the library. Campus security caught him coming out with my laptop. When they searched his bag, he had pills in there. Adderall. Like 60 pills in an unmarked bottle. He told campus police he was planting them in my room to frame me. Said I'd threatened to report him for cheating, so he wanted to get me kicked out first. Except that's not what happened at the hearing. Trevor claimed those pills were mine. Said he'd bought them from me all semester. His 2 roommates backed him up. All 3 of them testified I was their dealer. I got expelled. They got to finish the semester after a cheating violation warning. My appeals went nowhere because it was 3 witnesses against 1. I never got my degree. I work at a hardware store now. $9 an hour because no other college would take me with a drug-dealing expulsion on my record. And now he was dating my sister, calling himself Aaron, working some finance job in the city, acting like he'd never destroyed someone's entire future because he couldn't handle getting caught cheating. I didn't tell Katie. I wanted to. Every Sunday dinner for 6 months, I sat there watching him charm my parents, talk about his promotion, discuss wedding venues. Katie showed me the ring he bought. 2 carats, white gold, custom setting. She was planning an engagement party for next month. Then last Tuesday, Katie called me crying. She'd gone to surprise Aaron at his apartment after work. Let herself in with her key. Found him in bed with someone from his office. Katie packed her stuff that night, blocked his number, canceled the party venue. I drove to her apartment. She was on the couch surrounded by wadded up tissues, still wearing the t-shirt she'd slept in. The ring box was sitting on the coffee table, closed. She kept saying she'd wasted 6 months, that she'd trusted him, that she'd almost married him. I sat down next to her, picked up the ring box. Katie, I said, I need to tell you something about Aaron. She looked at me, mascara smudged down her cheeks. What? I opened my mouth to explain who he really was, what he'd done to me, why I'd stayed quiet this whole time. Then her phone started buzzing on the table. Text after text. Aaron's messages coming through on her laptop because she hadn't signed out of iMessage. I could see them popping up on the screen. Please let me explain. She meant nothing. I love you, Katie. I made a mistake. Don't throw away what we have. Katie grabbed her laptop and started typing. I watched her hands shaking over the keyboard. She was about to respond to him, about to engage. And I knew if she did, there was a chance she'd forgive him, take him back, marry him anyway. I reached for her arm to stop her, opened my mouth to say his real name, to tell her everything about Trevor Walsh and State University and what he'd cost me. But before I could get the words out, Katie stood up abruptly. I need his stuff out of my apartment, she said, her voice hard with anger. She marched to her bedroom and I followed. She started pulling Aaron's clothes from her closet, throwing them in a pile. Then she yanked open his nightstand drawer, the one he'd asked her not to touch. It was locked. Katie grabbed a screwdriver from her junk drawer and jimmied it open. Inside was a burner phone, a fake passport with Aaron's photo, but a different name, and a folder full of papers. Katie pulled out the folder and documents spilled across the bed. Credit applications and other people's names. Bank statements that weren't Aaron's. And right on top, a printed email thread between Trevor Walsh and someone named Marcus about the final target with my parents' address written in red ink. Katie stared at the papers. Her hands stopped shaking. Something different replaced the heartbreak in her eyes, cold confusion. Who the hell is Trevor Walsh? She whispered. I picked up the email thread. My hands were steady even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The emails detailed everything. How Trevor had been targeting families with liquid assets and trusting daughters. How my parents' house, paid off and worth over $400,000, was the next mark. How Katie was supposed to be the way in. Trevor Walsh, I said slowly, is Aaron. His real name is Trevor Walsh. Katie sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked at the fake passport, then at me. How do you know that? I told her everything. College, the cheating, the Adderall, the hearing, the expulsion. How I'd recognized him the second he walked through our parents' door 6 months ago, but couldn't figure out how to tell her without sounding crazy. Katie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she picked up the burner phone. It wasn't locked. She started scrolling through the messages. Oh my God, she said. Jenna, look at this. I leaned over her shoulder. The texts were between Trevor and someone saved as M. They went back 8 months, before Trevor even met Katie. The messages laid out the whole plan. How Trevor had found Katie through a mutual friend's Instagram. How he'd researched our family. How he knew our dad had just retired with a pension buyout. How he knew our mom had inherited her parents' estate last year. One message from Trevor to M, dated 4 months ago. She's perfect, completely trusting, already talking about marriage. Dad seems like the typical clueless retiree. Should have full access within 3 months. M replied, "Don't rush it. Remember what happened in Ohio. Take your time, lock down joint accounts, then we move." Another message from Trevor. Already handled the sister problem. She doesn't suspect anything. Even showed up to Sunday dinners and sat across from me without saying a word. Either she doesn't recognize me or she's too scared to speak up. Either way, not a threat. Reading that made my stomach turn. He'd been watching me, evaluating me, deciding whether I was going to be a problem. There was more. Photos of my parents' house, screenshots of their social media posts, a spreadsheet with their estimated net worth broken down by category: pension, inheritance, home equity, investments. He'd even calculated how long it would take to access each asset after the wedding. The most recent message from M was dated 3 days ago. Ring on her finger yet? Clock's ticking. Need access to joint accounts within 60 days? Or we move to the backup. Katie's face was white. He was going to marry me to steal from us. Looks like he's done this before. I pointed to another email chain in the folder. It referenced 3 other women in 3 other cities. Names, addresses, estimated family net worth. One of them had a note next to it. Completed, asset transfer successful, subject filed bankruptcy 6 months post-separation. My sister had almost married a professional con artist, the same man who destroyed my future to protect a cheating scandal. He hadn't changed in 4 years. He'd just gotten better at hiding. Katie stood up. She gathered all the papers, the phones, the passport, and put them back in the folder. Then she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. "We're calling the police," she said. "Tonight." I nodded. But something was bothering me. I picked up the email thread about my parents again. "Katie, look at this date." I pointed to the timestamp. "This email is from 2 weeks ago, and it mentions having someone inside already." We both realized it at the same time. Mom had mentioned last Sunday that Aaron had recommended a financial advisor, someone he worked with, someone who was helping her and Dad consolidate their accounts for easier retirement management. Katie grabbed her phone and called our mom. It was almost 10 at night, but Mom picked up on the second ring. "Katie? Honey, are you okay? You sounded so upset earlier when you..." "Mom, that financial advisor Aaron recommended. Did you give him access to your accounts yet?" There was a pause. "Well, yes, honey, just today. He's helping us set up a new investment portfolio." "Why? Is something wrong?" Katie looked at me. I grabbed my keys off her counter. "Mom, do not sign anything else. Do not transfer any money. I'm coming over right now." We drove to our parents' house, doing 15 over the speed limit. Katie kept scrolling through the burner phone, finding more evidence. More victims. More plans. The streetlights blurred past the window. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? By the time we pulled into the driveway, we had enough to send Trevor Walsh to prison for years. Dad opened the door in his bathrobe, confused. Mom was behind him in her nightgown, worried. The house smelled like the lavender candle Mom always burned in the evenings. Normal, safe, everything Trevor had been trying to destroy. We sat them down at the kitchen table and laid everything out. The fake passport, the burner phone, the emails, the credit applications, the list of previous victims. I watched my father's face shift from confusion to anger to something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when you realize how close you came to losing everything. "We gave him passwords," Dad said quietly. His voice cracked on the last word. "Full access. He said it was standard for the portfolio transfer." Katie was already on the phone with the bank's emergency line. I called the police. Within an hour, our parents' kitchen was full of officers taking statements and collecting evidence. The coffee pot was running on its 3rd cycle. Someone had moved the fruit bowl to make room for the case folders. The detective in charge, a guy named Hollister with a gray mustache and tired eyes, sat down across from me after he'd talked to everyone else. He had a yellow legal pad covered in notes. "This Trevor Walsh," he said, flipping through his notes. "You say you knew him in college?" I told him the story again. The cheating, the setup, the expulsion. My voice was steady now. I'd been waiting 4 years to tell someone who would actually believe me. Hollister stopped writing. He looked at me for a long moment. "There was a case about 3 years ago," he said slowly. "University kid got expelled for drug dealing. Claimed he was framed. We couldn't prove it either way. But the accuser matched the description of someone we've been tracking for interstate fraud." My chest tightened. "You knew about him?" "Not by name. We've been chasing a ring for 2 years. They target families through romantic relationships. The front man dates the daughter, gains trust, gets access to finances, drains the accounts, disappears. We've had 4 confirmed victims in this state alone, but the guy keeps changing his identity. No photo ever matches the descriptions because he alters his appearance between marks." I sat there, letting it sink in. Trevor Walsh had been doing this for years, maybe since before he framed me. Maybe I wasn't even his first victim. The expulsion, I said. That was him covering his tracks. He needed me gone because I'd seen his face. I could identify him. Hollister nodded slowly. It's possible. If you'd reported him for cheating and the university investigated, his fingerprints and photo would have gone into the academic misconduct database. Some employers check those. He couldn't risk it. All those years. 4 years of working at a hardware store. 4 years of my parents looking at me with quiet disappointment they tried to hide. 4 years of Katie never quite believing my story about what happened at school. All because Trevor Walsh needed to protect his scam. And now I had proof. Hollister closed his notebook. We're going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow. Bring everything you remember about the college incident. Names, dates, any documentation you still have. I nodded. I kept everything. Every piece of paper from the hearing. Every letter of appeal I wrote that was denied. He raised an eyebrow. 4 years? When someone takes everything from you, I said, you don't throw away the evidence. The officers left around 3 a.m. Mom made another pot of coffee that nobody drank. Dad sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, not saying anything. Katie was on the phone with the bank's fraud department, her voice getting sharper with each transferred call. I went outside, sat on the porch steps in the cold. The neighborhood was completely dark except for our house, which blazed with light like a beacon. Trevor had done this. Trevor had picked my family apart, piece by piece over 6 months. And if Katie hadn't caught him cheating, if she'd married him like she planned, he would have taken everything. The house, the savings, the pensions, everything my parents had worked 40 years to build, all because I'd reported him for cheating on an accounting exam. I heard the door open behind me. Katie sat down next to me on the steps. She was wrapped in one of Mom's old quilts. I keep thinking about all the dinners, she said quietly. All the times he sat at that table eating Mom's food, laughing at Dad's jokes. And the whole time he was planning this. He's good at it, I said. That's what makes him dangerous. How did you not tell me? She wasn't accusing, just asking. 6 months. How did you sit across from him every Sunday and not say anything? I thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, because I wasn't sure you'd believe me, I finally said. I barely believed it myself. 4 years ago, everyone thought I was a drug dealer. My own parents weren't sure. And now I'm supposed to walk into Sunday dinner and accuse your perfect boyfriend of being the same guy who framed me? With no proof? Katie was quiet for a long moment. I would have believed you, she said, but her voice wavered. We both knew it wasn't quite true. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you would have thought I was jealous, or crazy, or still making excuses for what happened in college. She didn't argue, because we both knew how close that was to what would have happened. We sat there until the sun started coming up. Neither of us went back inside. There was nothing to say, really. Just two sisters on a porch, processing the fact that the same man had tried to destroy both of their lives. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since everything came out about Trevor Walsh. So some of you asked for an update, so here it is. Buckle up because a lot has happened. First, the financial stuff. The bank managed to freeze the transfers before most of the money left my parents' accounts. Trevor's financial advisor buddy, whose real name turned out to be Marcus Devlin, had initiated a wire transfer to an offshore account for just over $80,000. The bank caught it in the pending stage because of the fraud alert Katie triggered that night. My parents got everything back except about $3,000 that had already gone through to some shell company. The bank is still working on recovering that. Dad hasn't slept through the night since it happened. I can hear him walking around at 3 a.m. when I stay over. He keeps checking the accounts, refreshing the balance every few hours. Mom blames herself for trusting Aaron. She keeps saying she should have known, should have seen something. She cries at random times, washing dishes, reading the newspaper, watching TV. I told her that's exactly what con artists count on. They're good at their jobs. That's why they're dangerous. But I don't think she really believes me. Not yet. Trevor disappeared the night Katie found the documents. By the time the police went to his apartment, it was cleaned out. No clothes, no personal items, nothing but the furniture that came with the rental. The landlord said he'd paid 6 months in advance with a cashier's check. The check traced back to an account under a different fake name that had already been closed. The landlord showed the police security footage from the building. Trevor was seen leaving at 11:47 p.m. on the night Katie found the drawer. He had 2 suitcases and a backpack. He looked calm, like he'd done this before, because he had. But here's where it gets interesting. Detective Hollister called me last Wednesday. They found Trevor, not through some dramatic police chase, not through forensics or wiretaps or any of that TV stuff, through Instagram. One of his previous victims, a woman named Danielle from Ohio, had been quietly tracking him for 2 years. After he drained her parents' savings and left her with $30,000 in debt from credit cards he'd opened in her name, she made it her mission to find him. She created fake profiles on dating apps, joined singles groups in different cities, followed patterns she'd noticed in his behavior. She knew he liked wine bars, knew he targeted women in certain age ranges with certain family situations, knew he moved to a new city every 12 to 18 months. She kept spreadsheets, cross-referenced missing persons reports, joined support groups for romance fraud victims, and collected stories that matched his pattern. She told me later that she'd almost given up twice. The first time was after 8 months of searching with no results. She'd spent thousands of dollars on private investigators, background check services, skip tracers, nothing. He was too good at disappearing. The second time was when she found a support group member whose description matched Trevor's MO perfectly, only to discover it was a different con artist entirely. There were more of them out there than she'd realized. A whole network of predators hunting vulnerable families. But she kept going. Something in her wouldn't let her stop. He took everything from my parents, she told me during the trial. My dad had a heart attack 6 months after Trevor disappeared. From the stress, he survived, but he's never been the same. My mom had to go back to work at 62 because their retirement was gone. And I was supposed to just let him walk away? Just let him do it to someone else? I understood. God, did I understand. Last month, she spotted him at a wine bar in Denver, Colorado. New name, new look. Shorter hair, no beard, different style of clothes. But she recognized his voice. That confident, easy voice that had made her believe he loved her. She didn't confront him. Didn't cause a scene. She took pictures from across the room with her phone on Zoom. Then she called the FBI. Trevor Walsh, also known as Aaron Mitchell, also known as Kevin Porter, also known as Nathan Reed, also known as at least 3 other names we don't know yet, was arrested at a hotel in Boulder 3 days ago. They found him with a 23-year-old nursing student he'd been dating for 4 months. Her name was Gemma. Her father owned a successful car dealership with 2 locations. She had no idea who she was really with. The FBI searched his hotel room, found 3 more burner phones, 2 laptops, and a binder full of targets. My family's page was near the front. There was a photo of our house that someone had taken from across the street, notes about my parents' daily routines, a copy of my dad's pension statement. Detective Hollister asked if I'd be willing to testify at the trial. I said yes before he finished the sentence, but that's not even the biggest news. Remember how I mentioned that getting expelled had basically ruined my life? How no college would accept me with drug dealing on my record? How I'd been working at a hardware store for 4 years because I couldn't get a degree? Hollister connected me with someone at the university, a guy named Dr. Pemberton in the Office of Academic Affairs. Turns out when they prosecute fraud cases that involve academic misconduct as part of the setup, the university can review old cases for potential reinstatement. I almost didn't go to the meeting. 4 years of rejection letters and closed doors had taught me not to hope for anything. But Katie made me go. She drove me to campus herself, parked in the visitor lot, and walked me to the administration building. Whatever happens, Gao, she said, see, we'll figure it out. I met with Dr. Pemberton in his office on the 3rd floor. It was small, cluttered with books and files, nothing like the formal hearing room where I'd been expelled. He was maybe 60, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Professor." I brought all the evidence. The emails, the police reports, the statements from Danielle in Ohio, and 2 other victims who confirmed Trevor's pattern of framing people who got in his way. Dr. Pemberton listened to everything. Then he pulled up my file on his computer, read through the original hearing notes, frowned at something on the screen. "Miss Kendrick," he said, "I have a question. At the original hearing, you claimed you'd never seen those pills before, but you didn't have any witnesses to corroborate your story. Is that correct?" I nodded. My roommate was out of town that week, and no one else ever came to our room. I was kind of a loner. He typed something. "And the 3 witnesses who testified against you, they were all roommates of Mr. Walsh?" "Yes. And they all had pending cheating charges at the time?" I sat up straighter. "I didn't know that. The hearing committee never mentioned, it's in the file." He turned his monitor so I could see it. All 3 had their charges reduced to warnings after your expulsion. I'm looking at the timeline now. Your hearing was April 15th. Their charges were reduced on April 22nd. 1 week. 1 week after I was expelled, the 3 guys who testified against me got their slap on the wrist and walked away. Dr. Pemberton took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Miss Kendrick, based on the evidence presented and the established pattern of fraud by the accused party, this office is prepared to recommend full reinstatement of your academic standing and expungement of the disciplinary record." I sat there. Couldn't speak, couldn't move. He kept talking. Said it would take about 6 weeks to process. Said I'd need to reapply for admission, but with a clean record and supporting documentation from the police, there shouldn't be any issues. Said the university might even offer a partial scholarship given the circumstances. "We don't do this often," he added. "In fact, this might be the first time in my tenure, but the evidence is overwhelming. And frankly, the original hearing process failed you. The committee should have questioned why 3 accused cheaters were so eager to testify against the person who reported them. 4 years. 4 years of my life gone because of Trevor Walsh. And now I might actually get to finish my degree." When I got home that night, I called Katie. She picked up on the first ring. "They're reinstating me," I said. "The university. They're expunging my record." Katie started crying. Good tears this time. "Jenna," she said, "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Back when it happened, I thought maybe you were just making excuses. I thought..." "Don't," I told her. "You didn't know. Nobody knew." But even as I said it, I felt something shift between us. Something that had been broken for 4 years was finally starting to heal. The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. The FBI took over the case from local police because Trevor had operated across state lines. They flew in 2 agents from their financial crimes unit in Denver, a woman named Agent Reyes and a guy named Agent Chen, who set up shop in a conference room at the local field office. I spent hours with them, going through every detail I could remember. The layout of the dorm, the exact time campus security caught Trevor coming out of my room, the names of his 2 roommates who testified against me. Everything. Agent Reyes was methodical. She had a way of asking the same question 3 different ways to make sure she got all the details. Agent Chen took notes on a tablet, occasionally pulling up photos or documents on a laptop to verify what I was saying. These 2 roommates, Agent Reyes said, tapping her pen on the table. Logan Price and Daniel Summers. You're sure they were the ones who testified against you? Positive. I'll never forget their faces. She pulled up 2 photos on her laptop. Both men, late 20s now. One with a receding hairline, one with a beard. Recognize them? I leaned closer. They'd aged, but it was definitely them. That's them. Logan on the left, Daniel on the right. Agent Reyes exchanged a look with Agent Chen. Logan Price was arrested in Phoenix last year for wire fraud. He's currently awaiting trial. Daniel Summers is a person of interest in an investigation in Atlanta. I sat back in my chair. They're still doing this? We believe Mr. Walsh recruited them in college, possibly trained them. They appear to be running smaller operations now, targeting individuals rather than families. Lower risk, lower reward, but the same basic playbook. I thought about that. 3 guys who cheated on an accounting exam in college, now running a fraud ring that spanned the country. And I was the one who tried to stop them. I was the one who'd paid the price. We're building a RICO case, Agent Chen said. Racketeering. If we can prove they operated as an organized criminal enterprise, the sentences get much longer. What do you need from me? Everything you can remember? And permission to access your university records, your banking records from that time, anything that helps us establish the timeline. I signed the release forms without hesitation, whatever it took. Update 2. 2 months since my last update. The trial started last week, and I need to get this out before I lose my mind. Walking into that courtroom was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not because I was scared of Trevor. I stopped being scared of him the night Katie found those documents. But seeing him there, at the defendant's table, in a suit and tie like he was some respectable professional instead of the man who'd spent years destroying lives for profit, that hit different. He'd cut his hair again, clean-shaven now, looked almost boyish, which I'm sure was intentional. His lawyer had probably told him to look as harmless as possible. He looked right at me when I walked in. And this time, I saw it. Recognition. He remembered me now. The college kid who'd almost blown his cover 4 years ago. The one he'd framed to protect himself. I held his gaze until he looked away. The prosecutor was a woman named Sandra Vega. Mid-40s, sharp suit, no-nonsense voice. She'd been working fraud cases for 15 years and had successfully prosecuted 2 other romance fraud rings. In our prep sessions, she told me the key was to stay calm, stick to the facts, and not let the defense rattle me. They're going to try to paint you as vindictive, she'd warned. Someone with a grudge who's using this trial to get back at the defendant. Don't take the bait, answer the questions, nothing more. The prosecution laid out everything over the first 3 days. 6 confirmed victims across 4 states. An estimated $400,000 stolen over 5 years. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, and something called romance fraud that I'd never heard of before but apparently carries serious federal charges. Sandra called witness after witness. Bank officials who tracked the money, FBI agents who analyzed the laptops, victims who told their stories in quiet, sometimes breaking voices. Danielle from Ohio was there. She testified for almost 3 hours, described how Trevor had swept her off her feet at a coffee shop in Columbus, how he'd proposed after 8 months, how she'd introduced him to her parents, her friends, her whole world, how he'd slowly gained access to her family's finances by offering to help manage her father's medical bills. When he disappeared, he took everything. Her savings, her parents' retirement fund, her credit score, her ability to trust. She'd spent 6 months in bed, barely eating, unable to work. Then she'd gotten angry. And anger, she said, was what saved her. I decided he wasn't going to get away with it, she said on the stand. Not with me. Not with anyone else. 2 other women testified. Similar stories, same playbook. Trevor found vulnerable families, charmed the daughters, became indispensable, then vanished with everything he could take. The nursing student from Boulder, Gemma, sat in the front row every single day. She'd only found out the truth when the FBI showed up at her door. She'd been planning to introduce Trevor to her father the following weekend. Her father, who owned 2 car dealerships and had just paid off the mortgage on their family home. Gemma didn't testify. The prosecutor said she wasn't ready, that her case was too new and the emotional damage too fresh. But she watched every minute of the trial, taking notes in a small blue notebook, learning who the man she'd loved really was. My testimony came on the 5th day. I wore the same simple black dress I'd bought for my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. Professional, unremarkable. I didn't want to give the defense anything to use against me. The prosecutor walked me through everything: college, the cheating, the frame job, the expulsion. Then she connected it to the larger pattern, showed the jury how Trevor eliminated threats, how he'd done the same thing to another witness in Ohio, a guy named Eric who'd gotten suspicious and started asking questions. That guy lost his job after Trevor planted evidence of embezzlement. Same playbook, different victim. Miss Kendrick, Sandra said, can you describe the moment you realized the man dating your sister was the same person who'd had you expelled from college? I took a breath. He walked through my parents' door and I knew instantly. It had been 4 years, but I recognized his eyes, his voice, the way he carried himself like nothing could touch him. And why didn't you tell your sister immediately? Because I had no proof, just my word against his. And my word hadn't been worth much for 4 years. The defense tried to discredit me. Trevor's lawyer, some expensive guy from a Denver firm named Harrison Wade, suggested I had a personal vendetta, said I was using this trial to rehabilitate my own reputation, asked if I'd been promised anything in exchange for my testimony. Hasn't the university already agreed to reinstate you? He asked. To expunge your record? Yes. So you stand to benefit directly from my client's conviction. I looked him dead in the eye. Your client stole 4 years of my life. No one promised me anything. I'm here because I don't want him to do it to anyone else. Wade smiled. Condescending. The kind of smile Trevor used to give. But isn't it true, Ms. Kendrick, that you've held a grudge against my client for years? That you've told friends and family that you wanted revenge? I paused. He was trying to trap me. I could see it coming. I wanted the truth to come out, I said carefully. That's not revenge, that's justice. And isn't it convenient that the truth finally comes out just in time to help your career? The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. But Wade had made his point to the jury. Or tried to. On redirect, Sandra asked me one simple question. Ms. Kendrick, if Mr. Walsh had never dated your sister, if he'd never come back into your life, would you still be working at a hardware store? Yes. And would your expulsion still be on your record? Yes. So the only reason you're getting your life back is because Mr. Walsh made the mistake of targeting your family? Yes. No further questions. I stepped down from the witness stand and walked past the defense table. Trevor was staring at his hands, not looking at me. But as I passed, I heard him whisper something. Just 2 words. Stupid bitch. I kept walking. Didn't react. Didn't give him the satisfaction. But I heard it. And so did the jury member sitting closest to the defense table. An older woman with gray hair and reading glasses. She wrote something in her notebook, then looked at Trevor with an expression I recognized. Disgust. The jury was out for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Trevor showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, like he was already planning his next move. But there won't be a next move. Not for a long time. Sentencing is in 3 weeks, but the prosecutor told me he's looking at 15 to 20 years federal time. No parole. After the verdict, Danielle found me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was smaller than I expected. Quiet, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Thank you, she said, for testifying. I know it wasn't easy. I shook my head. You're the one who found him. 2 years of tracking him? That's not nothing. She smiled, but it was tired. My therapist says it was unhealthy, that I should have let it go and focused on healing. She paused. But I couldn't. Not until he was caught, and not until I knew he couldn't do it to anyone else. I understood exactly what she meant. Gemma came up to us a few minutes later. She was crying, but trying to hide it. Her hands were shaking. I almost married him, she said. I was so stupid, You weren't stupid, Danielle said firmly. He's a professional. He does this for a living. You couldn't have known. Gemma nodded, but I could tell she didn't really believe it. That guilt would take time to fade. I knew because I'd carried my own version of it for 4 years. The shame of being the one who got caught, the one who couldn't prove her innocence. We exchanged numbers before we left the courthouse, made vague plans to stay in touch. I don't know if we will. Sometimes shared trauma brings people together. Sometimes it's just a reminder of the worst time in your life. But as I walked out of that building into the afternoon sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, more like relief. The weight I'd been carrying since college, the constant wondering if anyone would ever believe what really happened. It was gone. Trevor Walsh was going to prison. My record was expunged. I'd been accepted back to the university for the fall semester. That evening, the prosecutor called me. Sandra's voice was tired but satisfied. We got word from the Denver field office, she said. They're adding the RICO charges. All 3 of them, Walsh, Price, and Summers, are going to be tried together. What does that mean for the sentences? It means instead of 3 separate trials with 3 separate verdicts, we get to show the jury the whole picture. The whole operation. Every victim of mine, every scheme, every dollar they stole. She paused. It also means the sentences can be enhanced. Instead of 15 to 20, Walsh might be looking at 25 to 30. I sat down on my apartment couch, letting that sink in. 25 to 30 years. Trevor would be in his 50s before he saw freedom again. There's one more thing, Sandra said. The FBI found records on Walsh's laptop. A list of potential targets he never got to. Your name was on it. My name? From before he reconnected with you through your sister. It looks like he'd been tracking your family for over a year, waiting for the right opportunity. I felt cold. So he didn't just happen to meet Katie? No, he engineered it. He knew about your parents' assets. He knew your dad had just retired. He knew your mom had inherited money. And he knew you were the only person who could identify him. So he dated my sister specifically because of me? Partially. Your family was the target. But I think he also saw it as a kind of revenge. You almost blew his cover in college. Dating your sister, charming your parents, planning to steal everything while you watched and couldn't prove it, that was personal. I didn't know what to say. For 4 years, I'd thought the expulsion was just about protecting himself. I hadn't realized there was something more. It doesn't matter now, Sandra said. He's going away for a very long time. You made sure of that. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about the man who'd spent 4 years planning to destroy my family, thinking about how close he'd come. And Katie was waiting for me by my car with 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face like she might start crying. It's over, she said. It's really over. I hugged her, held on for a long time. She hugged me back just as hard. Not completely, I told her. I still have to finish my degree and find a new apartment closer to campus and figure out how to be a student again at 26. Katie laughed, wiping her eyes. Yeah, but you're going to do all of that. You're going to finish what he tried to take from you. She was right. For the first time in 4 years, I actually believed it. Update 3. Final, 6 months since the trial. This is my last update because honestly, things are finally normal enough that there's not much drama left to report. But I promised I'd close the loop, so here goes. Trevor Walsh was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 12. The judge, an older woman named Patricia Halloran, who'd clearly seen a lot but still looked genuinely disgusted during the victim impact statements, gave a statement about the devastating impact of romance fraud on victims and their families. Mr. Walsh, she said, looking directly at him, you exploited the most fundamental human need for connection and trust. You weaponized love. You destroyed families not for survival, not out of desperation, but for profit and for sport. This court has no sympathy for you. Trevor stood there in his orange jumpsuit and said nothing. No apology, no explanation, just silence. He'd been advised not to speak, his lawyer said later. Anything he said could have been used against him in potential civil suits. Smart strategy. Too bad it doesn't matter. He's going to be 62 when he gets out. If he gets out. His accomplice, Marcus Devlin, got 9 years. He tried to cut a deal by giving up information about other members of their network, but most of what he offered, the feds already knew. Turns out Trevor and Marcus were just 2 guys in a much larger operation. The FBI is still unraveling it. There are at least 4 other frontmen like Trevor, still out there, still running the same schemes. They released a victim database last month. Over 40 confirmed cases across the country, 40 families destroyed, 40 lives derailed. And those are just the ones who came forward. The FBI estimates the real number is at least double. My parents are doing better. Dad finally stopped checking the bank accounts every hour. He's sleeping through the night again, though he still double checks the locks before bed. Mom joined a support group for fraud victims that Detective Hollister recommended. She said it helps to talk to people who understand, who don't judge, who've been through the same thing. I kept thinking I should have seen it, she told me last week. I kept replaying every dinner, every conversation, looking for the signs I missed. There weren't any signs. I said, that's why he's so dangerous. She nodded. I don't know if she believes me yet, but she's trying. Katie started dating someone new about 2 months ago. His name is Owen. He works at a community center teaching after-school programs. He's nothing like Trevor. Actually, he's nothing like anyone Katie's ever dated. Quieter, less polished. The kind of guy who wears the same hoodie 3 days in a row and doesn't notice. He drives an old Honda with a dented bumper. He makes terrible jokes. The first time I met him, I was suspicious. Of course I was. After everything that happened, how could I not be? I found myself studying his face, looking for tells, watching how he talked to Katie, analyzing every word for signs of manipulation. Katie noticed. She pulled me aside in the kitchen while Owen was in the living room with our parents. I know what you're doing, she said quietly. And I get it, but Owen isn't Trevor. How do you know? She smiled a little. Because I spent 2 weeks doing my own background check before I let myself feel anything. County records, social media going back 10 years, credit report. I even called his former employer. I stared at her. You did a background check? After what happened? Of course I did. And you know what I found? He's exactly who he says he is. Owen Barrera. Grew up in Tucson, got a degree in social work, has worked at the community center for 3 years. His biggest scandal is a parking ticket from 2019 that he forgot to pay. I laughed. Couldn't help it. You really called his former employer? Pretended I was doing a reference check. They said he was reliable, kind, and terrible at remembering to water the office plants. She touched my arm. I'm being careful, Jenna, but I'm also trying to live my life. I can't be scared forever. She was right. We couldn't be scared forever. Trevor had taken enough from us. We couldn't let him take our ability to trust, too. Katie seems happy. I'm really happy, in a way that's different from before. Less showy, more real. She came to visit me at school last weekend, walked around campus with me between classes, asked about my professors, bought me an overpriced coffee from the campus cafe. It was the first time she'd ever seen me as a student. Before the expulsion, she was in high school and didn't care about my college life. Now she texts me about my exams, sends me study tips she finds online, treats my graduation like a family event we're all working toward. I'm doing well in my classes. Better than I expected. 4 years at the hardware store taught me more about discipline and patience than I ever learned as an 18-year-old freshman. I don't skip lectures. I don't cram the night before tests. I do the reading, take the notes, ask questions in office hours. My professors think I'm some kind of super motivated, mature student. They don't know the whole story. I don't feel like explaining it anymore. The university gave me a partial scholarship, like Dr. Pemberton said they might. They also assigned me a faculty advisor who specializes in helping students reintegrate after academic disruptions. Her name is Dr. Nadia Ortiz, and she's maybe the most practical person I've ever met. No sympathy, no hand-wringing, just clear advice and realistic expectations. She told me during our first meeting that I'd probably struggle in my junior year because the coursework would be harder than I remembered. "You've been out for 4 years," she said. "That's a long time. Your study habits might be rusty. Your foundational knowledge might have gaps. That's normal. Don't beat yourself up about it." She was right. The first few weeks were rough. I'd forgotten how to read academic papers efficiently, forgotten how to manage multiple deadlines, forgotten how exhausting it is to think at that level for hours every day. But I'm managing. One class at a time, one assignment at a time. There was one moment about 2 months into the semester that I'll never forget. I was sitting in Professor Morton's advanced accounting class, same subject that had started everything 4 years ago. The professor was going over a complex tax code scenario, and suddenly I realized I knew the answer. Not just knew it, but understood it deeply. The way the pieces fit together, the logic behind the rules. I raised my hand, gave the answer. Professor Morton nodded. "Correct. Can you explain your reasoning?" I walked through it step by step. The other students were taking notes. The professor was nodding along, and I thought, this is what they tried to take from me. This feeling of competence, of belonging, of knowing I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. 4 years late, but I made it. I still think about Trevor sometimes. Not in a traumatic way, just in passing. Like when I'm sitting in my accounting class and I remember Professor Graham, the one who started the investigation that led to my expulsion. He retired last year. I found his home address through a mutual acquaintance and wrote him a letter explaining what really happened. All of it. The cheating ring, the frame job, the 4 years I lost, the trial, the conviction. He wrote back 2 weeks later, a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. "Dear Ms. Kendrick," it said, "I always had doubts about the verdict in your case. The timeline never made sense to me. 3 witnesses, all with pending charges, all suddenly eager to testify against the person who reported them. I raised concerns with the committee, but they were dismissed. I'm sorry I couldn't do more at the time. I hope this letter finds you well, and I hope you understand that not everyone believed what they were told. Good luck with your studies. Sincerely, Richard Graham." It wasn't the apology I'd imagined getting all those years, but it was enough. I framed that letter. It hangs on the wall above my desk now. A reminder that even when the system fails you, even when everyone seems to believe the lie, the truth matters. It always matters. Eventually. The other day, I ran into someone I knew from freshman year, a girl named Bethany who lived on my floor in the dorms. She recognized me before I recognized her. Came up to me in the library, tapped me on the shoulder, said my name like she was seeing a ghost. "Jenna Kendrick? I thought you transferred." I almost laughed. "No, long story. I'm back." She looked confused but didn't push. We caught up for a few minutes. She's in law school now. Has a girlfriend. Seems happy. After she left, I sat there for a while just thinking about how many people from that time in my life assumed I'd just left, transferred, moved on. They never knew what really happened, and now, years later, they still didn't know. They'd go their whole lives thinking I was just another freshman who didn't make it. But I did make it. I'm making it. Every class I pass, every exam I finish, every paper I turn in, it's proof that Trevor Walsh didn't win. Danielle texted me last week. She's moving to Portland, starting a new job at a nonprofit that helps fraud victims rebuild their lives. She said she finally feels ready to stop looking over her shoulder. "I'm not going to let him define the rest of my life," she wrote. "Just the chapter where I learned how strong I am." Gemma posted on Instagram that she's engaged to someone she met in her nursing program, a guy who looks nothing like Trevor. She didn't include any details about her past, any reference to what happened, just a photo of a ring on her finger and a smile that looked genuine. I hope she's happy. I hope they're all happy. And me? I'm graduating next spring. I'll be 27 years old. Walking across a stage I should have crossed at 22. My parents will be there. Katie will be there. Maybe Owen too. Last week, I got a job offer. An accounting firm downtown is looking for interns who can start full-time after graduation. The HR manager who interviewed me asked about the gap in my education. I told her the truth, All of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. That's one hell of a story, she said. And you still finished your degree? One more semester. She smiled. We'd be happy to have you. I start in June. Yesterday, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name and apartment number. Typed, not handwritten. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, short. I know what you did. I know you're the reason he's in prison. When he gets out, we'll find you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called Agent Reyes. She came to my apartment within an hour. Took the letter, the envelope, everything. Dusted for prints. Asked if I'd seen anyone suspicious, received any other communications, noticed anything out of place. We've been tracking communications from Walsh's associates, she said. This could be from anyone in the network, or it could be a bluff. Someone trying to scare you. Is it working? She looked at me. Is it? I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the 4 years I'd already lost. About everything Trevor had taken from me. About the fact that he was sitting in a prison cell right now and would be for decades. No, I said finally. It's not. Agent Reyes nodded. Good. We'll investigate this. In the meantime, keep your doors locked, vary your routine, and call us if anything else happens. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that was getting cold. The letter was gone, taken as evidence, but I could still see the words in my mind. When he gets out, we'll find you. 18 years, maybe 25 with the RICO charges. By the time Trevor Walsh gets out of prison, I'll be in my 40s or 50s. I'll have lived an entire life. Career, family, everything he tried to steal. And if someone comes for me then, I'll be ready. Because here's what Trevor Walsh never understood. He thought he could break me, thought he could frame me, destroy my reputation, steal my future, and I'd just disappear. Just accept it. Just give up. But I didn't. I kept the evidence. I kept fighting. I kept going. And when he showed up again, when he tried to finish what he started, I was there. I was there. And I stopped him. Trevor Walsh is sitting in a federal prison cell right now. He'll be there for at least 12 more years.